Hello, America. Welcome to the Junto Podcast, where we promote the practical applications of critical thinking and bold creativity. I'm your host, Edgar Mills. Thank you for joining us. Hello, America. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with me. I appreciate you guys. So, what are we talking about today? Well, this is a topic that's been around. I wouldn't say it's the hot topic of the day. It kind of is. It's kind of ongoing political topic. And we're talking about, ICE, immigrations and customs enforcement. And, what's going on with all that? The perceptions and the authorities, the tactics, all those things. So, you may like or dislike my take on it, but sovereign nations, they control their borders. That's the way it is. You're not a sovereign nation if you don't control your borders. The question here is how things are being done. It's not necessarily that they're being done, and I'll point examples of that here in a minute, but it's not optional. It's definitional. Borders define a country geographically, at least. It's not tyrannical at all to control borders, to know who's coming and going. It's an administrative necessity. That's the way it is. The U.S., as with any country, has the right and the duty to decide who enters the country, who stays in the country, and who may or may not become a citizen. And again, I say the question is not whether to enforce immigration law or not, but the question is how. I think that's the question. It can either be done with precision, right? With some consistency of application, a little respect for human dignity, or it can be done the other way with spectacle and exhibition that just kind of undermines its legitimacy. Immigration in America is obviously, it's governed by the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. And there are legal pathways to become a citizen on the books. Family sponsored, if you have family that lives in America or is American. Job, employment based. There's actual diversity lottery. Yeah. And that's a weird one because they use that lottery to pull in immigrants from countries that we don't already have massive immigration from. So think Europe, right? Or something like that. Or Eastern Europe, where there's much less immigrants from those countries. And then there's, the buzzwords, refugee and asylum seekers. And then there's all the temporary visas, right? The student visas and the work visas, tourist visas, all that stuff. And all that stuff is meant to be sort of scrutinized, like I said, in a consistent way, in a precise and consistent way. Question is, is it? And then how do you get into the country illegally, right? Well, there's different categories of that. There's improper entry. Yeah, and that's I'll give you word for word. That's entering outside of a port of entry, right? A designated port of entry. That's coming in across the border somewhere in Texas or Arizona or California or just washing up on the shore somewhere. There is no paperwork. There is no inspection. There is nothing. It's just, that's it. First offense is misdemeanor. Yep. Subsequent offenses are felonies. That's on the books. That's the way it is. Can it be changed? Sure, it can be changed, but that's the way it is now. And then there's unlawful presence. So you come over on a visa. then you overstayed your visa. That's unlawful presence. And once you're over 60 days, that can trigger anywhere from 3 to 10-year bar from reentry, and after you get booted out. I think that's fair. That's a 6-month window of cushion. And then there's illegal reentry. So once you've been booted, if you come back in illegally, that's just a felony. That's it. That's just a felony. And then the grounds for not letting someone in, or the grounds for deporting someone, well, criminal convictions for sure, security threat, security concern, ties to terrorism, that kind of thing. And this one I want to point out, a public charge risk. What does that mean? Public charge risk. That means you're coming over, or you want to come over, you have come over, and you've become reliant upon the system as opposed to contributing to the system. Now you're getting all the free government money. And this says this in the law here, public charge risk. But that's not the way it plays out. There is a huge public charge of illegal immigrants. And then taxpayers pay for it, good people. That's a fact. That's a fact. We're just trying to help them get on their feet. The vast majority of illegals that come in illegally or overstay visas or whatever, they're in the midst of civil proceedings. They're not even being charged criminally. The vast majority. No person is illegal. Well, yeah, that sounds good. But if I come squat in your living room and you don't like me, well, you like me or not. If I come squat in your living room and take over, then what? Are you going to try to get me out of there? Or are you just going to accept that I live there and start doing my thing up in your living room? Yeah, it's silly. No person is illegal. Yeah, there's clearly laws on this. Most illegals are facing civil proceedings, not criminal. Let's look at the types of illegal immigrants. And like all groups, right? It's always labels. And I'm always on about that. Everybody, you're going to label yourself out of a group eventually if you keep going. But illegal immigration also is not monolithic. There is no homogenous group of illegal immigrants. They're not all from Honduras or Mexico or anywhere. Now, there are patterns, and there are big numbers and different locationally, right? But here's how I'm breaking them down. You got the low end, right? There's a scale, and you got the low end, and these are economic migrants, people who are coming here for. And this is the group, by the way, that the progressives want you to believe that represents every illegal alien. The people who come here who are poor, they come from maybe South America, Latin American countries, Mexico, and they're just looking for work, looking for a little bit of safety, a little bit of predictability in life, a little less crime, a little less poverty, and they just want a fighting chance to succeed at life. They're out there. That's probably the vast majority. And that's what the progressives want you to believe is every single one of them. But then on that scale, there's the middle. And this is where it starts to get dicey with the middle, right? You got like opportunistic criminals, drug traffickers, gang members. It's factual. MS-13, Tren de Aragua, whatever the name of it is. They're coming here illegally. They're a part of that. Now, I'm categorizing them differently, right? With the drug traffickers and sex traffickers, just common low-level street criminals. That's it. That's what's in the middle of that scale. We don't want those people. Why would we? They're not just trying to come for a better life. They're 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 coming to exploit opportunity. Well, everybody exploits opportunity, Edgar. No, they're coming to exploit, proper exploit in a malignant, nefarious way. And then you got the far end, the other end of the scale, the extreme end of the scale. And these are genuine security threats. These are people who are maybe on a terrorist watch list, Islamist extremist ideologies who see Western society as the enemy, and they're working to advance the jihad and the caliphate. And I'm not just talking about Muslims, but that's who wants that. That's a method. That's a tactic from the extremists, is to get people in here through the borders, low vis, low key, illegal, maybe some fake papers, sleeper cells. It exists. There's been plenty of intelligence assessments. There's been encounters at the border that have documented these individuals. And they're a fraction of the total numbers for sure. But treating the entire immigrant population like they're the worst of the worst is disingenuous, and it's inaccurate, if not calculated. And then ignoring the existence of the worst is reckless and naive, if not calculated. So there's that. We're not even getting the ice yet. And then what are some of the second and third order effects that nobody really talks about very much? Well, this may seem minuscule, and numbers play out to where it does seem somewhat minor, but in our Constitution, which is a great document, folks, it's a brilliant document. I say it all the time. It requires an actual enumeration of persons, apportioning House seats and electoral college votes. Yeah. The number of humans. The census has long counted every human. Citizens, non-citizens, whoever. And furthermore, when they count, I stress that those aren't 100% accurate counts. If a census dude, volunteer, some middle-class liberal woman is out doing a census and she rolls up into the hood and she feels nervous, she can just give a general count. She can look at the number of cars, the average number of people who live in a house or an apartment, put whatever number she wants on there. Yeah. Call me out if I'm wrong on that. Anyway, so those numbers impact the number of seats that get portioned out to the states by population. Well, who are some of the bigger populations? Well, California for sure, New York, immigrant populations, some of the bigger immigrant populations. Aside for Texas and probably Florida, most of the states with the biggest illegal immigrant populations are blue states. Yeah. So never mind importing votes just for elections. We're talking about potential shifts in the representation of America based on illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants, look, this might sound controversial to you, and again, call me out. I welcome it. Illegal immigrants aren't to be represented in our government. I don't care what AOC or Rashida Tlaib has to say about that. There needs to be a delineation of benefit between citizen and non-citizen. There needs to be that. Anyway, carrying on. So the overall estimates on those numbers, they say overall shifts are up to 3 seats one way or the other. It's insignificant, is what they say. And that maybe, but it's an uncertainty, right? There's estimates, there's models, there's this and that, but They haven't looked at the numbers like the numbers have been. I think the last time they did an estimate was, I don't even know. I'm not talking about census. I'm not sure when the last census was, but they're talking about since they look back as far as 1980 and said, well, since 1980, if we counted all illegals, or if we didn't count all illegals, sorry, they do count everyone. If we did not count all illegals in the census, then the House seats would only shift 1, 2, or 3 seats left or right, depending on the states, because the way they divvy those up anyway, they don't do it per state. Anyway, it's a whole nother friggin' civics lesson. It's an uncertainty, and the uncertainty is the problem, folks. The uncertainty is the problem. When the numbers are misrepresented or poorly represented or underrepresented, again, the representation becomes less precise. It's a structural concern. It's a administrative concern at minimum. At minimum. So that's an effect that I think matters that most people just disregard. I don't think it should be disregarded. Never mind the votes, right? Never mind having illegals voting in elections. There's been plenty about election fraud. There's been plenty that gets brought up a lot. So I'm not going to belabor it. But no, illegals should not vote. Again, there needs to be a delineation, benefits for what it means to be a citizen at all versus not. And that may not sound very libertarian to you, but on this matter, maybe I'm not very libertarian. I'm not sure. And I did a podcast. So we're going to now, what's the next sort of second, third order effect of all this illegal immigration? Well, I did a podcast on this, sort of looking at Europe and the unchecked immigration in Europe and compared it. And I'm going to follow up on that here. Yeah. And we're talking about UK, Germany, Sweden, Denmark. Since 2015, for the past 10, 11 years, there's been a friggin' exponential rise in crime, mostly sexual assault and rape. And that correlates directly with the number of immigrants flooding into Europe. It correlates directly. Well, correlation doesn't equal causation, Edgar. Well, I beg to differ in this case. It's not hard to connect the dots. And all the data that I've talked about before exists. In Germany, immigrants account for about 40% of the crime. And that's a massive overrepresentation. Massive. Mostly rape, sexual assault. UK is very cagey. They're very cagey. They don't want you to know. They don't want you to know how bad it is. They don't report accurate numbers. They just say that foreign nationals are arrested for sexual offenses rates higher than natives in some periods in some localities. Yeah, they're not trying to let you know what's going on. Denmark, we're talking about over a third of sexual assault and rape committed by immigrants. And look, I hate to do this. But these don't span all immigrant groups. Like I said, immigrants aren't monolithic. They don't span across, but primarily these are from North African and Islamic country immigrants by men who notably, doctrinally, by religion, disregard women as human, I guess. And the result is finally, too little too late, that different countries in Europe are starting to tighten up their immigration laws a little bit. They loosen them up dramatically and showing the world how good they were, how benevolent they were. and then it bit them right in the ass. And there are just thousands of women across Europe, tens of thousands of women across Europe who have paid the price for that, that virtue signaling, the real price, the physical price. And folks, America's not immune to these dynamics. Don't think we are. We're already starting to see similarities. We have been starting to see similarities. Okay, now, all the poo-pooing on immigrants. I'm going to try to make a case for clear and then functional paths to citizenship, because I do think immigration is good overall. I do, provided some things are in place, provided that the immigrants aim to come here and assimilate to a degree. I've done podcasts on this talking about the American identity. Do you need to replace as a immigrant from name your country? Do you need to replace your existing identity completely with an American identity? Or can you merge the two? Yeah. So if we were in a functional system right now, we'd be able to pair solid enforcement with some like practical, workable legal channels. And they exist already, but clearly they're not working. And I always rip on Congress. This is one of the things Congress is meant to do, to make regular naturalization and immigration. Or is it just naturalization? But they're meant to make a policy for that, to standardize it, to make it functional. And there's a lot of latitude on the executive branch there. A lot. As it should be. Why not? So some of the things, look, I know liberals hate this, but have some merit-based protocol. Yeah, bringing somebody who brings skills, or and then look at, do they know the language already? Are they willing to learn the language? Are they going to assimilate? Are they willing to assimilate? Do they have a clean criminal background? That's not a lot. It's not a lot to ask. And then another way we could shape this up is a sort of expanded legal work visas. I know people poo-poo on these H-1B, this and that and the other. They're bringing in all these Indian dudes for the tech industry. Look, that's nuanced stuff. But if there's a segment of the labor market that needs people, and Americans aren't filling those roles because either they don't want to, they feel overqualified, they feel it's beneath them, or they're underqualified, why not? Why not expand the legal work visas? Yeah. And then, sort of shore up the process for like long-term residents who are not citizens yet. Shore up the process. They meet strict standards, and they can be. It's simple. And if these things are consistently applied, well, I mean, what's one of the things that could happen there? If we consistently apply sort of these, and these are administrative, these are not, you're not going to see these on the news every week. There's not going to be riots over these things. Well, it could sort of disincentivize, sort of illegal entry if there's a practical, I'm not going to say easy way to become a citizen, but it looks like it's doable with not too much hassle or intimidation or overly complicated, etc. Any amnesty plan that has existed or does exist, I'm not down with amnesty, because it does incentivize law breaking. It does incentivize illegal entry. If I can get there, boy, I can catch some amnesty small print. You know what I mean? No, amnesty's no good. And I don't even mean you can shape up some little temporary amnesty programs as long as there's strict enforcement. You can shape up some temporary amnesty programs as long as there's strict enforcement. But without the strict enforcement, it just incentivizes law breaking. And then overly strict enforcement without any like practical path, well, that just drives the immigrants underground. It just becomes more underground. It becomes harder to manage and maintain and track. So there's always a balance, folks. Just always a balance. If we had more solid, updated, practical laws on the books, when I say solid, this is a key word I'm using here. Solid as in predictable, clearly enforceable, without a lot of gray area. And yes, I'm going to say oriented toward our national interests, not some feel-good, whimsical, free-for-all humanitarian whatever, right? National interests do matter, folks. Look at Europe. Is it in their national interests not to let their women be raped and murdered? Well, mostly just raped over there. Not as much murdering going on, just a bunch of raping. Is that in the national interest? I don't think so. Solid laws that are predictable, consistently and evenly enforced across the board. Minimal loopholes. Minimal complication. It can be done. There's smart people out there. Problem is, a lot of these smart people are so freaking smart, they want to make it to where they're the only one who can freaking decipher the law. Rip on the intellectual class. So what about ICE then? That's why we're here, to talk about ICE. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. When was it created? Anybody know? Well, a lot of you listening to this remember 9/11, 2001, and what came from that? Well, the Patriot Act came from that. And then the Homeland Security Act came from that. Old W signed in the aftermath of 9/11 because everybody was scared shitless. Yeah, desired effect. Whoever blew up the Twin Towers, they got the desired effect. Yep, it was effective. If you think it was Saudi and Egyptian and whoever terrorists, good. If you think it was the evil cabal, the international cabal of billionaire, puppet masters, well, they got the desired effect. Whoever did it, the desired effect happened. So anyway, the Homeland Security Act combined INS, which was Immigration and Naturalization Services, with Homeland sort of security or customs investigative, practice and procedures and whatnot. And now ICE has two sort of directorates underneath, and one of them is Enforcement Removal Operations, ERO. And then the other is Homeland Security Investigations. Now, a little side note here. Homeland Security, HSI, and then Enforcement Removal, ERO. I'm 100% sure in my mind that someone who was creating these acronyms wanted to call it Homeland Enforcement and Removal Operations. And then some guy like me said, stop. All right. So anyway, ICE existed. It came to be. It came to be. So they just went heavier on what INS did without a bunch of controversy, really. ICE does, except with controversy. What changed? Well, first of all, since its inception, every president has used it ruthlessly. Of course, Bush did. Obama notably became the deporter in chief. He set records on deportation. Nobody wants to bring that up. Well, nobody on the left wants to bring that up or acknowledge it. Everybody's all upset about what Trump's got going on. Obama has deported more. Golly, the contradictions and the irony, hypocrisy, you call it what you will. It's insane. And of course, Trump. So ICE has been they've been in play. It ain't like they went dormant when Obama took over. They didn't go dormant when Biden was in office. And they're not dormant now. So what's catching everybody's attention, though, is the current spectacle. There's a high volume of removals going on, and of convicted criminals, though, right? So they're doing what they're meant to do. They're just it's a spectacle. ICE has disrupted human trafficking networks, and smuggling networks, drug networks. They've seized just tons of drugs. They've removed gang members from our borders. They've engaged foreign nations to work with repatriation of these people. HSI Investigations has dismantled transnational criminal organizations. They're doing good things. They're getting good results. But then on the flip side of that, what's going on? Well, highly controversial, some of the conditions in some of these detention facilities. People have died in custody. There's been documented abuse, largely from the immigrants on each other, but however. But what's the big one? What's everybody poo-poo about? It's the raids. It's the raids on people's homes and jobs and neighborhood sweeps. And those raids happening under the authority of administrative warrants versus judicial warrants. That's a problem. That's a legitimate constitutional question. And that tactic that they're using those administrative warrants, which is very questionably whether constitutional, that just foments distrust. Why are we doing it? And I'll say this, I say it all the time on various topics. The fact that I object to a way a thing is being done doesn't mean I object to that thing being done. Right? I think we need strong immigration policy. I don't think we need no-knock raids from... All right, moving on. We'll get to it. These men, I say this a lot about a government, about special operations, even about CIA, like paramilitary, and about the ground level dudes are good dudes. They have pretty wives, well-adjusted children. They like their motorcycles and their trucks, and they like to go camping with their kids. They go to church. They're functional members of society, law-abiding, loyal. But these guys who go to do this job, specifically the enforcement removal operations, they get an 8-week academy. Think of, as we're sitting here now, and I don't want to poo-poo on cops too much, but think of the most incompetent cop you know. And if you're a cop, you know a few of them. Think of the most incompetent cop you know. He went through 8-week academy. 8-week academy don't mean anything. And you're like, yeah, but what do they teach in there? Because 2 months is, that's a long time to be learning a thing. Okay, yeah, sort of, but not really. Army basic training is 2 months long. It's 8 weeks long. there's some soldiers that come out of Army basic training that aren't fit to be trash men. Not to disparage trash men. And in this curriculum, they talk about immigration law, firearms, use of force, de-escalation, apparently. They get instructed on the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, apparently. And these are all correct things to have in that curriculum. But are they thorough? Are they thorough? Are they emphasized? Or are they just rushed through like all things in all 8-week academies are? Check the block. We do this, boom. Here's your test. You got an 80, boom. Or they just check the blocks. Now, like all agencies, they probably got special response teams or, special tactics teams or whatnot. And they got a selection, process and more advanced training, I guess. But what we saw, and the reason I bring this part up specifically, is what we saw mid-25 into 26. There was a hiring surge for ICE. And there was kind of a joke, like they're just taking whoever. If you're a rent-a-cop at the local shopping center, ICE take you. And it was a joke. I got a buddy that was looking at it, but the pay, they were taking dudes, but the pay wasn't on par with the role, madness. But through this hiring surge, anyway, there was questions like there is in all agencies when there's we need people, so we are going to lower the standard. And every agency will swear to you that they did not lower the standard. But there's nuance in there. So people slide through. They need people. Numbers are more important than the quality, apparently. And the leadership of ICE will tell you, our core hours have remained the same. Constitutional training is maintained or restored. Well, I got a side note, and that was a quote, or restored. It's maybe semantics, but how can you restore something that was always there? And the quality of humans and the consistency of training, it's rightfully under scrutiny, and it should be. So if there was any incident, which has been, by the way, where civilians have been killed, if I was a greasy lawyer, the first thing I would do is say, let me see your training records. I want to know what qualifies this human being to be out in the streets with firearms in a capacity of enforcement. Well, it's a federal program. We've already blessed off on the curriculum. Well, if you're a cop, most training curriculum are woefully inadequate. Most. Yeah. And what people call advanced training in all these various agencies, even in special operations, what people call the advanced stuff is really, that's where the baseline kind of should be. The basic stuff, man, it's so basic that it's almost hurts as much as helps. Especially when you get into the check the block, cover your own ass sort of TTPs. Man, okay, training. I could go on about training forever and ever and ever. So what's the controversy? Anyway, of course, we're talking about it because it's controversial. ICE. Well, when you're scrolling social media or you're looking at the 6 o'clock news and you see Call of Duty operator looking dudes wearing level 4 body armor, and they got these multi-agency team, everybody's wearing different shit, and they look like a bunch of mercenaries walking the streets, and they're walking and they're rolling up on somebody's work, somebody's job, or they're doing neighborhood sweeps, and it's highly visible. It's shock and awe. I assume the desired effect there is, well, deterrence, I guess, and yeah, flood a neighborhood so they can rapidly remove as many people, illegal immigrants, as possible. And I guess the desired effect is what I assume to be the Well, unfortunately, the most important one is the overt display of authority. That's what I think. They want to strike fear in that look at what we can do, and we are willing to do it, and we don't care how scary it is. It's necessary. That's what I think they're trying to say. I disagree. And what are their metrics for success in these big operations? I guess it's all quantity, right? The number of arrests, number of removals, number of detained, I guess. Well, look, these tactics, current tactics, at minimum, are polarizing and quite possibly unconstitutional in a lot of cases. And tragically, some folks out there on the hard right see this as long overdue overt demonstrations of resolve and seriousness on the matter. And they're thinking, yeah, go do it. If you're not hiding anything, you got nothing to worry about, right? And then other people, and I'm not just talking about the hard left, I think broadly, people see it as sort of intimidation theater. That's what I see it as. That alienates communities. It very unnecessarily complicates any voluntary cooperation from a local level, because now you're putting the local cops on a political hot plate, and they got enough problems. They see it as unnecessary risk, collateral damage to legal residents. And look, I think it's a spectacle, and I think it's undermining its own legitimacy for any sustained and long-term practical enforcement. I think it's undermining itself, ICE, or the president, or whoever. I mean, all these bizarre three-letter agencies fall under the executive branch anyway. So yeah, ultimately the buck stops with the president, I would say. And I'm going to remind you, because I object to the way a thing is happening doesn't mean I object to the thing happening. Just object to the way it's happening. Well, Edgar, you're so smart. You bitch and moan all the time. Well, what do you propose? Well, folks, I always have an opinion. These high visibility, high force, show of force ops, militarized operation. Why do you say militarized? That's a catchphrase that the left made up. Well, when you roll up in a neighborhood in America in a goddamn JLTV or MRAP or something, or a Bearcat, and you got 4 or 5 deep, and you got dudes, like I said, look like they're Call of Duty friggin' juggernauts. That's militarization. It looks like a military operation. Whether the general public doesn't get the nuance or not, that they're not stupid for not getting the nuance. You're not presenting the clear picture. All that stuff, it might achieve some level of success, but it's short term, and it's going to generate backlash. It has generated backlash. And the way they do it, like I said, with the local, it makes local cooperation very distasteful. They don't want to be involved in any political friggin' firestorm. And they don't want to be involved in any unconstitutional challenges. We can be more discerning, more surgical the way we do things, and we ought to be. We can use hard tactics when necessary. Sometimes it is. But we can do that alongside, or even in most cases in place of, these more discerning, discriminate alternatives. Now, here's where I restate that I am no brilliant strategic mind. My talent lies in tactical and operational level execution. That's my history. That's it. But I do have thoughts. And one of the most important things for an American agency in America, in my opinion, is the appearance, the optics, to use a catchphrase, the catchword, the buzzword. We're not meant to intimidate our citizens. We can do these we can replace all the tactical. They got these friggin' $1,500 Ops Corps helmets on, and they got thousands of dollars worth of kit, millions of dollars worth of equipment, as much or more as some military units even. We can replace that, right? Get rid of the tactical get up when you're doing routine enforcement, and wear plain clothes, just like INS used to. Wear plain civilian clothes, professional, or even soft uniformed officers that looks no different than a typical cop walking down the street. Use normal civilian unmarked vehicles, or even marked vehicles for that matter, but not rolling up in force. If 10 cop cars show up in front of them, there's like a red flag, right? You can do routine enforcement routinely. Maintain a professional, low-key posture, demeanor. You can do that. Use very clear, unemotional, verbal identification and show them a written judicial warrant. Yeah, that's it. That'll work. Well, Edgar, what if it's a high threat criminal, blah, blah, blah? Okay, well, then act appropriately. But they're not all high threat. I already said this. If you assume every single illegal immigrant is the worst of the worst, you're being disingenuous and outright wrong. And shaping your operations around that is disingenuous. If we do that, right, just the demeanor, just the appearance, just the presentation, well, what's the desired outcome there? Well, reduced public outrage over all these viral video, militarized raids and this and that and the other that you see all over the goddamn social media all the time. That'll squash that. That'll squash that. And then that tactic would foster a higher willingness of, well, local law enforcement for sure, but even local citizens to be a little more cooperative. It would lower the chances of somebody trying to run. If just two dudes approach the house and knock on the door, that's not to say you can't have outer perimeter eyes, right? You can have dudes posted up. Anyway, never mind. Tactics. That'll reduce the panic, flight, or violent resistance that could escalate. I think one of the problems with ICE is they don't, whatever de-escalation they train at the 8-week academy is woefully inadequate. That's what I think. So this tactic, you still have the deterrence, right? They still know ICE is out there doing their job. They still know that they've got to, okay. But now the political backlash is significantly reduced. And that's important. I know as a ground level guy, you don't think it's important. That's not my problem. That's my boss's problem. It's a problem. It affects a lot of things long term, to include funding. Politicians will cave when there's political pressure. The politicians are the ones who sign those budgets. And then what's another thing? You don't have the militant protests showing up, getting shot dead by some amped up ICE agent, because there was never a big to do anyway, right? What else? Okay, I'm going a little long already. What about a little transparency, a little public interaction? ICE could publicly rank and prioritize a hierarchy of targets. And what should be the high priority? What should be number one? High value. National security threats. Known national security threats. Known terrorist watch list guys. Put it out there, man. FBI's most wanted. They got that, right? ICE can do that. Hey, immigrant population. This is who's number one on the list. And then what's the next tier down, right? Well, violent criminals, criminal history, violent or drug or any kind of violent crime, right? If you have that in your background, or if it's happened here, you're gone. You're number two on the list. Followed up by, border crossers. We talked about the scale, right? The low end guys. The sort of opportunistic criminals, maybe not necessarily violent, but opportunistic. Those are next on the list. And then finally, you got the working class guy. You're just coming over for opportunity, nonviolent, otherwise non-criminal, maybe even a family man. Put that criteria out there. This is the priorities. This is what we're doing. This is who we're after. And the order of effort that we're after. What do we think will come from that? Well, here's what I think will come from it. I think you'll get focused resources, right? If you prioritize, right, and work toward those priorities, those resources can be focused, which will produce results, and you will get the most dangerous individuals off the American soil. The public messaging is now sort of easier to defend. So let's say we've already gone low vis, not overt, right? And now we got public messaging that we're putting out that you are seeing what our priorities are. It's easier to defend that. It becomes a talking point for you, not the other side. And then the sort of the economic migrants and the non-criminal types, they've got sort of lower immediate pressure, right? They're not worried about getting actual rolled up. And what that will do is kind of reduce these sanctuary city, the resistance from these sanctuary cities, these leftist, that'll kind of reduce that resistance if we go just a little softer and prioritize the truly bad people. And then the other side can stop framing everything up as these indiscriminate militarized raids. I think the overall number of high value targets will increase, even if the overall volume stays flat. It shouldn't be all about the numbers. It should be about reducing the threat. That should be the priority for ICE, reducing the threat, physical threat. I think we can do that. Prioritize and put it out. Share it with the world. Another hot topic is technology. Well, ICE can invest in these technological platforms. They can share data amongst other agencies, which they probably do already. As far as biometric watch lists, there's a lot of bio guys we have biometrics on, a lot. They pop up somewhere. We got criminal databases for days. Use them. And use them more effectively. Track the visa overstayers. Now look, if you're here on a visa, not chances are, that's a technique that terrorists use as well. They will sponsor student visas. Then they come over and overstay. So you can't just overlook tourists and student visas and work visas. So we got to track them. And various other records within legal limits, right? Within legal limits. And then have small specialized teams within not your 2-month academy guys, but small specialized teams, surveillance dudes, or high threat, kind of like the U.S. Marshals, right? High threat warrant stuff. Have guys like that who deploy small scale only after confirming and corroborating intelligence identifies that that's a high priority individual. What's the outcome of that? Well, again, we get high value targets off the streets. We get less collateral damage on U.S. citizens and residents and whatnot. We have short surgical operations, low that hit and quit, gone. They don't have time to plug in on an app where ICE is going to be for the next whatever. There's less neighborhood disruption. And I think then we'll see a measurable drop. Well, in wrongful detentions, right? If we have that really very specified capability in action and it's very precise and surgical, then wrongful detentions are going to go down because we're going to get the right guy. And then subsequent lawsuits for wrongful detention will go down. And you actually use your intelligence capability as a force multiplier. And you can use less physical officers on the ground and get more precision. Yeah. All this, of course, within the confines of the Constitution. What's something else? Well, shift pressure from the illegals and specifically the migrant workers, the sort of laborers, just the financial immigrants, right? Shift focus off of them for sure and shift it onto the employers who hire them, who knowingly hire them. Get rid of these big sweeping work roundups. Get rid of them. They're ugly. They present a bad picture. They're tyrannical looking. And then start doing some systematic audits of these businesses. Start issuing fines. Start bringing criminal cases against employers who knowingly hire illegals. Nobody wants to hear that part. Now, let me ask you a question. I don't want to get into it. I was going to draw a comparison with prostitution and Johns and pimps, but disregard. Yeah, and then again, we have these small specialized teams that once we've identified a workplace that is hiring illegals and they've gotten fined and all these and that, we identify the workplaces that are operating as hubs for criminal activity, meaning bringing immigrants in, sending them out, right? There are places out there doing that. Focus on them. And what do we get from it? Well, if a business thinks they're going to get hemmed up for hiring an illegal, they're not going to hire illegals. Many of them out there already are like, no, man, I got to do my checks. I got to make sure. So the demand for illegal labor is going to go down. The demand will go down because it shifts risk to the businesses and not the individuals. Immigrant self-deportation will go up. If they're not able to come here illegally and get a job, they're not going to come here illegally. They'll either self-deport or they'll figure out how to become a citizen or get a work visa. They'll figure it out. And the left loves to underestimate people. They love it. The left loves to think, blacks can't get identifications. Workers, they can't be expected to speak English, blah, blah, blah. They'll figure it out. I promise you that. So then the numbers start to decrease of illegals and there's no mass deportations. There's no raids. It's just it's a subtle effect, but an effect. And then legitimate employers start to regain their workplace competitiveness. Yeah. And then a secondary effect on that is that there's less incentive for new illegals to come over because there's no work to be had. Yeah. Subtle effect, but it's an effect. All right. Now this one's going to get a little weird. But what about some kind of program for voluntary sort of self-deportation? Incentivize illegals to go home. and not through violence, not through intimidation or coercion. It might be a little coercion, I guess, but have a one-time sort of structured program to where, hey, it's not amnesty, no, but there's a decriminalization, right, for a time window. And in that window, if they opt in, they can get travel assistance, one. They can get reduced restrictions on reentry. If you've done wrong. Now we're giving you an opportunity to leave, to correct that. And then we will help you come back in a correct way. That sends a message of like, look, we're not whatever it is, racist, xenophobic, whatever you want to call it. Oh, man. Sorry, there was a phone call. Spam. Yeah, and that's good messaging. That's like, hey, look, we're trying to help you be right. We want you to be right. We need you to be right, and we're going to help you be right. And it creates a positive environment. And then obviously you got to have a section, right? Teams to follow up on that and manage that and help that. And there's all a little bit of specialized training in all these things, but there always is. I think that will yield results. I think a significant number of people will look at the opportunity to like, okay, completely decriminalized for this, and they'll take advantage of it, especially if it doesn't cost them any money and there's no confrontation with juggernauts. And it frees up other enforcement apparatus to go after dangerous people. And what it does, though, is it sort of demonstrates a mature analysis of the situation that recognizes and distinguishes the categories of unlawful people, right? And it differentiates. Look, I recognize you're not a violent criminal. I recognize you're just here to work and support your family, right? And I think that'll improve efficiency of the agency overall, but overall public perception of the agency. Yeah. I'm talking a lot about public perception. It matters. We're citizens. We don't want to be ruled in a tyrannical fashion by militarized organizations. All right. Next, and I hesitate on this. The use of technology. I already mentioned it a little bit, and I'm coming from a military perspective here. And like I said, I do hesitate to offer this as an alternative to current tactics. But there is so much current AI-driven surveillance capacity out there. Various trackers and monitors and recognition technology, all these things. And absolutely no, they shouldn't be used on American citizens. But what about illegals? If we could focus these capabilities constitutionally on illegals. And what illegal? Well, you got to scan, you got to find. No, I'm talking about illegals set for people who have a court date or have been given a court date. All right, people who've already had contact. We then, with technology, will track them until some adjudication has been made. They either get sent home or they get their papers signed and then they're no further tracked. There's a way to do it, and I think we should consider it. I mean, hell, even ankle monitors. And that would free up physical human beings, again, to work on high threat cases. And now all this requires corroboration and confirmation and all these things. And I'm not saying this flippantly at all. And I know it doesn't sound very libertarian of me. There are still constitutional restraints. But if you can do it for paroled ex-cons in America, why can't you do it for illegals? Our ex-cons are citizens. Citizenship still should have some benefit, even if you're an ex-con. It don't mean you get stripped of all your rights, even though they do that, especially with the Second Amendment, by the way. It's a whole nother topic we should talk about. So if you can do it for American citizens who've served their time. I can't do it for illegals who are not yet, who are here illegally. Yeah. I think the benefit of this monitoring is that, well, one, high risk individuals, if we've identified them in the process as high risk, well, they're easily tracked. Faster location confirmation, we can get to them. I think it makes a lower physical operational footprint. We might not need less dudes, but we need less dudes on the ground. We need dudes looking at monitors. We need dudes analyzing intelligence and that kind of thing. And I think it reduces the risk of Fourth Amendment challenges, really, from actual citizens when you're doing these big, giant raids and all this mass surveillance on neighborhoods and stuff. And I think it's scalable to however big, and I think the cost, initially, but technology is constantly getting cheaper and more powerful relative to manpower. Manpower is not getting cheaper. All right. What else, man? Are these good or bad or other? What do you think? I hope you guys are thinking on these. Well, another tactic we can use is to have sort of clear. There's a thing out there, 287G. It's sort of like a memorandum of agreement between federal and local law enforcement. And it authorizes local officers to act on behalf of ICE, but only in the event of criminal cases. They can shape that up to where instead of having an ICE battalion roll up into your town, your local law enforcement has the authority to do essentially what ICE has the authority to do. During the conduct of routine policing, they're not going to set up raids on somebody they think's illegal if there's no warrant for it. But if you get pulled over because you've got an outstanding criminal warrant and then you find out you're an illegal, well, and there are some places in these sanctuary cities that refuse to cooperate. It's got to be shaped. There has to be very distinct and clear parameters and guidelines. It can be palatable to the local municipality, especially if it keeps ICE out of your neighborhood. I think that's a viable option in place of all these big militaristic raids. I think that gives ICE, the benefit of this is it gives ICE a broader sort of geographic reach, right? All these municipalities are on board with this. Some may not be still, but whatever. And you can keep the feds out of your space, man. And the local agencies retain their autonomy, one, and their sort of political, should be neutrality, because ICE is political whether you like it or not, even though Obama used ICE. There was no controversy about ICE when Obama used it. But now it's a political tool. It's weird. But it puts it all onto the locals. And the locals already have some level of trust in their community, right? Some level. But if they do it correct, they can build that trust within the immigrant community too. Because look, I didn't go into a lot of research on this, but there's plenty of immigrants out there who do not appreciate illegal immigrants coming in. So anyway, it creates less overall damage. It creates less overall angst. People that hate the cops already. It's the same cop. It's the evil you know. You don't need a whole crew of feds coming in also. And that minimizes all these open-ended sort of neighborhood sweeps and all this stuff. And you can remove criminal immigrants through existing police interaction that is likely to happen anyway. So all these things that I've just said, taken all together, they don't abandon law enforcement, immigration enforcement at all. They add nuance to it. And a common theme was the optics and the way things look through the political lens. Because you need public support, folks. You need public support. especially, yeah, you need public support, hearts and minds. You need that. And these things I've just laid out will help you with that. They reallocate efforts. They reprioritize efforts. They don't take away anything. They refocus high threat targets, high value targets. And all these things together lower the temperature. Yeah. And all these things together reduce the frequency and the size and scope of these massive operations that look and feel like military occupation. And ultimately, it's more long-term sustainable. You'll get your numbers, right? You'll remove high threats and you'll get a steady removal of illegals, but more importantly, genuine threats. You will minimize the constitutional clashes, and you'll draw very clear distinctions that's visible to both citizens and immigrants between you just enforcing standard sovereign state immigration policy versus indiscriminate political theater. That'll be clear for everyone, transparent. Those are my alternatives. So now, let's talk about the Fourth Amendment for a minute. Where'd the Fourth Amendment come from? Yeah, colonial America, right? There would be these general warrants and writs of assistance that allowed the British to just do willy-nilly search and seizures based on their military need or whatever. Maybe some kind of violation of some random law, but mainly just because harassment, I would say, with no probable cause, with no anything. Warrants, one, they need to be judicial, not administrative from your agency. Two, they need to be supported by probable cause, and they need to be very specific in purpose. That's what the Fourth Amendment means to me. And I don't think that's a unique understanding. Now, so courts have generally maintained that ICE warrants that are administrative, signed by ICE supervisors, do not authorize forced entry into a home. Yeah. In order to go into a home, ICE or any law enforcement needs either consent, don't invite the vampire in, right? Or a judicial warrant. And that is what's required for non-exigent home entry. And now recently, the administrative policies have shifted to be more aggressive and assert, more authority that maybe it doesn't have for administrative warrants. And that has triggered lawsuits. Lawsuits ain't free. We pay for them. And the home, folks, our homes, even an illegal's home, retains a higher level of protection under the law, as it does with castle doctrine if you're doing self-defense, right? Somebody breaks in your house and you blast them. It should retain a higher level of protection under law. This is where you sleep. This is where you are not on alert to the evils of the world. Your doors are locked. You're in bed, butt naked, chilling. There should be a heightened level of legal protection there, even for illegals, in your home. So you need not that you can't get a judicial warrant. I'm sure you can. It's not just because it's hard don't mean you don't go through the process. Due process. And illegal immigration status ain't a free pass just to go bust up into somebody's house. Because all that does is create more constitutional challenges and more public backlash. All right, I'm coming to a close here. Our borders must be controlled, people. Every sovereign nation does it. We should do it. There's no reason not to. If you think we should have open, free borders and influx of whoever, whenever, however, you're wrong. Every functional nation does it. The alternative is a gradual erosion of our sovereignty, our public safety, our social trust. Progressives love to talk about the social contract that will be violated for sure. And all the things that make classical liberal self-government possible will be erased. Enforcement should be stringent, but it should be consistent and predictable. It should be prioritized against threats first, high priority threats, violent criminals, risks to national security, etc. The legal entry process should be clear, workable, practical, consistent, and predictable. And it should reduce incentive for illegal entry because the legal way is so functional. Why would I come over illegal, risk being a criminal, when I can just fill out this paper, go do my interview, boom. Not amnesty. Not amnesty. Human dignity needs to be maintained, and human dignity is compatible with the rule of law. Because we're enforcing law don't mean we're violating human rights. In fact, one strengthens the other. We need law to maintain human dignity, and we need dignified humans to maintain law. The heavy-handed spectacle and the constitutional shortcuts undermine authority, undermine legitimacy, undermine functionality, undermines everything to do with the process. Surgical, intelligence-driven targeting, absolute respect for the Fourth Amendment, and a mature distinction between opportunity seekers and predators serves both the security of our country and maintaining our American character. Much better than open borders does, and much better than the shock and awe massive sweeps does. Those are my thoughts. I welcome your feedback. I hope you have some thoughts on it. It's a big topic. It matters. It matters in the scope of life today. Political life, sure, but everyday life in some places. Probably in, Minnesota, up in Michigan, Flint, etc., Texas, New Jersey, California. It matters. All right. I appreciate you guys for listening. I have consolidated the website. OspreyShootingSolutions.com now has a hub on the main page. And that hub, one spoke goes to firearms training, one spoke goes to security consulting, and one spoke goes to teamwork and leadership development. I still have the Two Team Guys site up, but everything that's on that site is now on OspreyShootingSolutions.com. That site will be going away soon. The SiloFTC.com will be going away soon. And yeah. So we got OSS and we have the Junto podcast. Yep, trying to simplify life. Simplify my life. So please listen. Please follow. And then, of course, folks, we have our efforts to be charitable to local people, and that's the Help a Homie Fund. And you can go to givesendgo.com/help a homie fund, and you can donate a little money if you feel so led to do so. Small efforts right now, but small efforts matter. So please check that out and give it a look. Otherwise, folks, I appreciate you all for listening. I really do. And I hope you continue to listen. Please send me your feedback, give me suggestions for topics and whatnot. All right. Be good to each other. Have good manners. And take care. All right. I love you, folks.